Hi everyone, so several weeks ago I made some coasters from a design I purchased on Etsy, and they were for a team retreat swap, and I made 20 of these to give out, and this was one I kept for myself. Just a very simple coaster design with kind of an envelope backing. I actually glued the backing down on the ones I gave away, but you could leave it open, it's entirely up to you. I also purchased another design from Etsy and I combined the two designs to make this coaster, so it was personalised to the crafty group. But in today's video I'm just going to show you how to make the basic coaster. I can't remember the Etsy seller name, but I will look it up and I'll pop the name on the screen for you, so if you want to go and purchase either of these designs. As I say, they were purchased from Etsy, but from memory they were from different designers. Okay, so I'm just going to go over to my screen. I've got the basic coaster design loaded up onto my USB stick and I'm going to start stitching it out on my Brother V5 LE. Okay, so I've got my 4x4 hoop loaded up with tearaway stabilizer. I've got the design already selected on my machine and I'm just going to now stitch step 1. All the details are in the instructions that you get with this stitch file. So I've cut a piece of batting that's big enough to go over the placement line that the machine has just stitched for me. So now I'm just going to stitch step 2. Okay, I'm going to remove the hoop from the machine and I'm going to trim the excess stabilizer away from the stitch out design. This is how it's looking, and I'm going to trim all around the stitch line. So that's how it's looking now. I'm going to pop the hoop back into the machine. And stitch step 3, which is the base fabric. So I'm just going to line up my piece of base fabric over the stabilizer that I've just trimmed, and I'm going to stitch the next step. Okay, so now I'm going to stitch the next step, which is for the placement for the top panel. So this design comes with 2 designs in the file, and it's in all embroidery stitch file formats, and you can stitch it plain or you can stitch it with words. This particular one I'm stitching plain, which is what I did on my original, and I added a design and words myself separately, but I don't want the words that come with this stitch file. So now I can see the placement line for the white panel, and because I used various patterns for my base piece of material, I doubled up the white fabric so that the patterns wouldn't show through as much. So I've got a piece of white cotton, and it's doubled up, and I'm just going to position it over this stitch line here. And now I'm ready to stitch step 5. So this has to come out of the machine now, and I have to trim the white fabric away like I did at the beginning with the stabilizer. So I'm just using my curved scissors, holding up the white excess fabric, and I'm just trimming around as close as I can to the stitch line that the machine has just put in for me. So I'm going to stitch step 6, which is like the zigzag stitch now, which will be the underlining stitch for the satin stitch that's going to go all around the white edge. Step 7 is the lines that the coaster is going to put on for the words. Now I'm not stitching the words, but I still want to put the lines in because this is kind of meant to look like a piece of paper. So I'm just going to switch out the colour of my thread. And I'm now ready to stitch step 7, and I'm using a pale blue. Okay, so that's finished. It's now going to stitch the 2 holes, or the faux holes I should say, that make this look like a piece of paper that you would have in a folder. So I'm just going to go back to the white, and this machine is so easy to thread, it's amazing. Okay, so I'm just going to change the thread again. Now it's going to put the stitched vertical line in. As I say, this is meant to kind of look like a piece of paper, I think, from a, you know, a notebook or a folder. This total stitch out with the file as it is 14 minutes long, but my original 20 that I made, that I modified and added in extra elements, was a 19-minute stitch out. So with the cutting involved, each coaster took me about 25 minutes, so I could literally only do 2 coasters in an hour, and I actually made 21 of these coasters, so over 10 hours worth of work, 20 of which I gave away and 1 which you saw at the beginning. I'll show you again at the end so you can see the comparison, but this stitch out I'm doing today is the basic blank file as you would buy it. So we're now on to step 9. So now I'm just going to go back to my white thread, I think, for the rest of this design. So I'm just going to take out this particular thread. So now it's going to do the satin stitch over that original zigzag stitch it did a few steps back. So I'm just going to put the presser foot down and start the machine. And now finally step 14, which is the two pieces that are going to be for the back, and you fold these in half, and the fold line needs to go towards the middle of your design, so all your raw edges are on either side. So I'm going to place my first piece down so it covers the whole of the design with the folded side inwards, and then the second piece on top so it slightly overlaps, again with the folded side inwards. Now, one thing I will point out here, I've got my presser foot raised higher than the default, and I can do that in the settings on my machine, and it just helps with in the hoop projects where you're going over things that might have a lip on like this, so it helps to not kind of get caught up. But what I'm also going to do is take a piece of masking tape and place this across the top and bottom where the folds are to help stop the foot from catching. Okay, that's the stitch out finished. I'm going to take this out of the machine and then I'm going to unhoop it and cut round it. Okay, so I'm just going to remove the masking tape, and it just does pull away where it's been pierced by the stitches, so it's easy enough to remove. And this is all going to be on the inside, so it's not going to be seen. I perhaps could have done with cutting my fabrics a little bit wider, because this one is really quite tight on the edge here, but it should be okay. And I've not got a lot of overlap in the middle. On my others I had about a ½ inch overlap, which is what the design recommends. So just be mindful when you're cutting your fabrics, do them, you know, as per the written instructions that come with these. As I say, I was making 21 of these in total, and I just started chopping fabric willy-nilly, you know, when I got halfway through and realised how much work was involved. So some of my, you know, pieces like this one might be a bit tight in size. Okay, I started cutting before I realised what I needed to tell you. So you need to turn this over and you'll find a square box. You need to cut around that square box on your design. And then now you just need to flip this right side out, and I use a really old, I think it's Pergamano embossing stylus for things like this. It just helps, it's not pointed, and it helps push out your corners. I'll come in a bit closer. Push out all the corners and then just fold in your lining. As I say, if you've, you know, done the overlap ½ inch like it says in the pattern, you'll have more of an overlap here. And basically all as I did, I just applied a little bit of fabric glue here and stuck that down, but you can leave it open if you want to. So here it is, all complete and finished. As I say, if you've got more overhang on the back, you won't have this gaping, but just put a little bit of fabric glue or add a little hand stitch if you want. I used fabric glue on all of mine and they were perfectly fine. If you look at the one I showed you originally, I had more overhang here, so it, you know, you don't really need it. So that's the project. It's made to look, as I say, I think like a piece of paper in a folder. So I think that one's turned out okay. So that's the original stitch file as purchased. There is another one where it puts words in it. I think it says something like, don't make me use my teacher voice or something like that. I can't remember. But I chose to just do the blank one of this time for this tutorial. And there's the one I did originally, where I took out all the lines. I took out the two little like faux holes, the vertical line, all the horizontal lines. I added in a separate design which I purchased, and I also modified this design because this design had all hearts that kind of dangled down here. So in Embrilliance Essentials I took all them out, and then using one of the fonts that's directly on my V5 LE, I added the Crafty Group name just to make it more personalised. So that's today's project. I hope you like it. It really is, you know, a nice little stitch out. As I say, this total design, doing it this way, says it's a 14-minute stitch out, and I think it has 14 steps as well. Please give the video a thumbs up, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Thank you.